Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a video titled, The Movie Was Better. I know, hear me out. So, there is one of the oldest jokes and oldest, discussions among book readers as soon as movies came out was the book was better. There's T-shirts and bags and memes about it all the time. And for I would say a majority of films that are based off of books, this is actually the case. At least the majority of the ones that I've seen. I haven't seen every movie that's been adapted based off a book, but for a lot of them, particularly in the hard genres that I follow, the book is better because it can go in depth a little bit more. But what about when the book isn't better? What about when the movie is actually better than the book? There are some people that would say that's like impossible to be. And my philosophy towards filmmaking is I think that the movies need to be as close to adapting the books as they can, but there is an occasion where I'm okay with them changing things, but it's pretty rare. And I have 5 movies to talk about. And these 5 movies I think worked well because of the changes they made to the book. But again, as a general rule, I prefer the movies to stick to the book rules. But let's talk about them and talk about why I think the movie's better than the book and things like that. So I have 5 total. So let's begin with my number 5. My number 5 is The Princess Bride. Now, this is an interesting book because it's not the development of book to movie is not the standard development. Most of the time, the way books happen is an author writes a novel, and then it gets picked up, and someone else adapts it to be a movie, or sometimes in some cases now television. And then you also have the reverse, where a movie gets made and a studio says, we want this author to basically turn our movie script into a book. That's where novelizations come from. And there's some great book YouTubers who focus only on novelizations. So there's those are the 2 normal avenues you can go. This is the 3rd avenue, which is this was a screenwriter who had an idea for a movie, could not convince any of the studios to give him money, so he wrote it as a novel. And then the novel sold so well, he was able to convince the studios to give him the money to make the movie, and he ended up shooting his script for the movie. Well, because of that, this book just feels a little wonky. There's most of the chapters in this book are really long. There's 50, 60, 70 page chapters, and then you'll come across a 2-page chapter. It was you feel whiplash because just the chapter lengths I don't think are designed well. The other thing with this book is that I don't think it has a good frame story. The frame story is about basically how they got the story. Even though this is by William Golden, it says S. Morgenstern's. He pretends someone else wrote it, even though he himself wrote it. And so the frame story is really weird, and it has to do with a potential affair. And it's just a really weird frame story, and it just doesn't work. The movie's frame story is a much better frame story. And because of a lot of the jokes in the book work better as movies because they were meant to be visual jokes and gags. So I think that because this was originally meant to be a movie and instead he wrote it as a novel so that he could eventually turn it into a movie, the movie was better than this, and it's more entertaining. And it's I would read this again if I'm have to for school, but otherwise, no, I don't ever want to read this again because I just think the movie's better. Let's go to I'm going to do these 2 movies together, my number 4 and my number 3. And I could not for the life of me find one of my copies of this book. I must have left it somewhere else. So I'm just going to hold up one of the 2 books because these go together. So I have my number 4 would be Prince Caspian, and my number 3 would be Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Both of them by C.S. Lewis. Part of the Narnia series, and I am of the opinion that I like the movies of these better than the books. For one, I think that the movie of Prince Caspian is really entertaining visually. I think the pacing is great. The action sequences hooked me in that movie. Man, the action sequences were so entertaining to me. And and I know some people felt that the pacing didn't work as well with it. And a lot of people compared it to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was like near perfection. And it's like, yes, when you compare it to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, neither of these two movies is gonna stack up as well. But if you compare them to the book counterparts are really short, and they're kids' books, and they're made for imagination, but not necessarily for like big imagination necessarily. It's much more smaller and classic in style. And so when the movies came out, and with Prince Caspian, it was just putting these action sequences in that were great. With The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I always had a problem with it. The thrust of the book is we're trying to find the seven lords. That's really all there is. And it's like, yes, but you're risking so much time and effort, and would the king really risk that? And would it be worth leaving Narnia? And would all the events unfold the way that they do? Like, the book doesn't seem as plausible to me. The movie, on the other hand, gives a reason why they have the imperative to keep going. It's not just because they need to find the lords; it's that they need those swords they'll be really important. And I think that the element of finding the swords is kind of important in the book, but they really play it up. And also, Eustace is a good character in the book. He was done fantastically. He was played fantastically in the movie. I also thought that the actor they got for Prince Caspian was also fantastic. And just it was, and when you put the trilogy together, you really the book series as a whole is about the Pevensey clan and is about Narnia itself. But when you put the movie trilogies together of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader, to me, it's Lucy's story, and it becomes about her start in Narnia and her end in Narnia. And when you bookend that, it makes Prince Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader that much better to me. So that's why I think that the movies are better in this case. Let's go next to one that is a more recent read for me, and that was Mockingjay. I thought that the book Mockingjay was largely disappointing. It was fine as a book, but it was not as entertaining and not as strong as it could have been. And I feel that that Collins was hemmed in, that she had written the first two books around 380 pages-ish, and that either she didn't or her editors didn't. I don't know which one it is. But for some reason, she was limited to only telling it in less than 400 pages. And because of that, she has to speed through the story. She has to speed through the plot elements. And we don't get a lot of long time to really get to know the characters, to understand the headspace that Katniss is in, to understand the headspace of the other characters, because it's from her perspective. In the movie, since they split it up into two movies, you now have two movies to tell this story instead of just one, and so they were able to add a lot of scenes, but the scenes they added really made me more emotionally connected to the characters. I think that had they done Mockingjay as just one movie, I do not believe that I would be quite as invested in the Peeta and Katniss dynamic. I don't think I would root for them quite as much. But I did, because you spend the whole first movie, even though Peeta isn't in the first movie, it's all about her wanting to be reunited with him. And then when they finally do reunite, it's so bitter because of what happens to Peeta. And then the rest of the second movie is all about them rehabilitating Peeta and all about him trying to get back with Katniss. And I thought that the movie was able to give that the time that it needed. And also I think the action scenes in the movies were also done really well. And I think that overall, like, they follow the similar plot beats a lot. The movie just takes more time with it. And of course, the music in the movie is fantastic. James Newton Howard did a great job in the movies. So that's why I think the movies are better for this one. And I think the books are better I think the first Hunger Games book is better than the first Hunger Games movie. And I think that Catching Fire, the movie and the book, are both like on par. I think they're about similar. They did a really good job adapting it. Next, I have book number 1. This is probably the most controversial pick, I think, and also Probably because the book's held in such high regard, and also the movie is held, or the movies are held in so low regard, and that is The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien's novel. I'm not a huge fan of the book. I think it was entertaining, but I'm not a huge fan of it. I read it in high school, and mostly read it because I wanted to get the backstory for The Lord of the Rings, which is my favorite movie trilogy of all time. And as books, they're fantastic books. But I felt that this was just too small. I felt that this was just J.R.R. Tolkien just like taking a stab at writing in his universe, and he couldn't tell as big a story, and it also doesn't have enough foreshadowing for the big Lord of the Rings series. And I felt that the story needed to have that foreshadowing. When they announced they were stretching it out into a movie trilogy, a lot of people complained about it, and when the first movie came out, it was like, okay, that was pretty good, but how much of the book do we have left? And then the second movie came out and was really good, and then the third movie was not liked by most people because it takes like 20 pages of the book and does an entire movie about it. I thought they all worked really well because I thought using Sauron and introducing him in a small scale in Desolation of Smaug and in Battle of the Five Armies was really, I think, a great idea because it ties in the trilogy better into The Lord of the Rings. So that was great. I also thought that the way that you get all this extra time to really get to know each of the dwarves independently. In the book, you know a handful of the dwarves, but you never really get to spend a long time understanding them individually. They kind of like clump together. And in the movies, I'd say you get to understand most of them. There's a handful of the dwarves in the movies that don't really get too much time, but they actually expand each of their stories quite a good amount. So I really like that aspect of it, and also I just think that they're just fun to me. It's like a visual spectacle, and so I just have a blast. Whereas in the book you have to get through J.R.R. Tolkien's heavy writing, which is not as heavy as in like The Lord of the Rings with Silmarillion, but it's still kind of a little bit more froofy. Whereas the movie it's very straightforward. So that's why I think the Hobbit movies are better. I know that's a controversial type of thing to say. Movies are better, and especially with the books to movies that I discussed here. But that's just how I view these movies and book adaptations of books. So do you have examples of what you think are excellent book to movie adaptations where the movie is better than the book series? Let me know those thoughts in the comments section down below. And also, do you disagree with me on mine? Let me know that as well. So, until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.